at any one point in time, there's only a certain amount of money that exists in the global economy. Now, the people who can choose to input more of that in are usually the ones in power, so therefore they can make the moves that allow them to be more powerful and never allow the people that are less powerful, that may be a little bit less well off, less fortunate, and we're talking about countries here, gain that power back. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing opportunity and inclusivity and participation being given to these people, and that's why we're seeing massive growth in these areas, right? That's why we're seeing the slowest to adopt are the countries in the most power on the old system.
Let's just go and see the world and just show them what it really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden.
I just think I'm just excited. I'm pumped for what the next couple of months is going to hold. I think we've got some big projects in the works and it's going to be fun.
I'm excited by this this token thing that we're looking into.
Yeah, so
hopefully Rally get back to us soon.
Yeah, I actually started to talk a little bit about this on my story, and something that we're probably going to do a bit of is, we're obviously looking at building our own social token, and one thing I was talking about on my story is bringing everybody on the journey. So we obviously are trying to deliver education around this. We want to teach the future, or business of the future, investing of the future, but it's definitely something that we want to actually really go for it, to be able to understand it and to be able to kind of teach it and have conversations around it. So yeah, it's exciting times. I think that's probably why I'm hyped. Maybe a few coffees have pushed me over the edge a little bit. That could be
you
why.
Have a week-long black. Settle down.
Yeah. Well, I've had 2 week-long blacks, man. Come on, give me a spell. But hey, okay, little hack for anybody out there who wants to drink more coffee. You have week-long blacks, you get to have more of them. Everybody laughs at me, but I'm the real winner.
Yeah, that's true. But you could just have normal ones and you'll be all fine as well.
No, but see, I like drinking coffee, right? So like, it's not necessarily the buzz. Maybe the first step is admitting it. But for me, it's about, I love reading and studying in the morning. And I know if I have 2 normal coffees, I would probably be nude. Like it would send me over the edge. Think about it. This is me. One thing that people are going to start to learn, I think, a lot more is that I do get a bit weird sometimes. But
it's usually in the afternoons.
Yeah, it is because I need that.
Yeah. It's when we bust out the basketball.
But yeah, so I like to drink coffee while I study, and one's not enough. I get through them too quick, so it's just a little hack. All right, so we're sitting here. Obviously, we're here with John.
Hello.
So John is the producer of the show, and he's going to be getting into these conversations with us.
He's going to get weird with us.
Yeah, he's getting weird with us. He's getting weird with us. Obviously, yourself, Braids.
Yeah.
And me, the weird guy. But what are we talking about today, Braids?
Well, we're going to go off the back of what you just said before with our social token and all that sort of thing, because that has been what we've been looking into, especially from an investments front as well, because the only way to learn about this is to have skin in the game and to track it. And that's what we're going to talk about, is just what ideas we have been looking at recently. And I think that'll be really informative.
For sure. So we've kind of been looking at, like, especially as it relates to investing, we've really been diving into 3 main areas. One area that, you've been, doing and investing in for quite a long time. And
which we're both a bit off at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we're going to cover the 3 main sectors of stocks. So, potential companies that we're looking at that we think are really interesting, maybe potential areas as well. NFTs is something that we're both new to, so we're going to kind of, just talk about those a little bit.
Some of the projects we're interested in. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also taking a little look at crypto as well, and kind of how we're seeing things in that space and projects that we're looking at. So,
and why we're sort of looking into that as well, because there's obviously a reason for it, and we're trying to invest into the the macro plays that we think make sense.
Yeah, and we got a premise, guys. This is not investing advice. You know, we're not giving you advice. Really, what we're trying to do here is just create insight, and kind of give you guys areas that you can start to look into as well. And you do have to do your own research. You do have to kind of go away and understand, because tied to some of these ideas is risk, and risk is a big part of investing as well.
Especially with the macro at play at the moment, because there's a lot of uncertainty, and if you don't have high conviction for whatever you're investing into, it could spell for quite a bit of trouble, especially with the volatile markets at the moment.
Yeah, John, so I'm interested. Do you do much investing?
A little bit in the crypto world.
Ooh,
Yep. I was talking.
We were talking about
yesterday.
it yesterday. Yeah.
what was I doing?
Who knows?
Being weird in the corner. Awesome. Cool.
You don't own any stocks or anything?
Not stocks.
No ETFs.
No ETFs.
Do you pay super to
Yes.
yourself? You
Yep.
do. Who are you invested in with that?
I think I'm with BT.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you do have stocks. It's a form of savings.
No, but that's
people
the thing.
People don't mention it.
Yeah, super's one of those funny ones, right? Like, you don't really. You kind of just think like you're putting money into a bank account, but you forget that it's actually being invested.
Yeah. When was the last time you checked your super?
I actually checked it not long ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we. I think just before tax time, I
Okay.
was looking at. I put like a bit of a more of a sum there, and that was the first time I think I checked in probably 3 years.
Were you happy with the balance?
Not really.
No.
One of my good friends, without naming names, actually took all of his super out and put it into Bitcoin as a self-managed.
I know a few people who took it out with the COVID thing where you could take out the 10 lots of $10,000. Not a good idea.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Not a good idea. They don't realise that by the time it comes to retirement, that $10,000 will potentially be worth $110,000. And that's chewing into how much you can
Depends what
retire
you're
on.
spending it on, though, right? Like
If they're reinvesting it into a business or whatever, then that's great. But most people probably just took it out just to live off. And yes, it makes sense now. In the future, that's gonna be bad. But if you don't know, you don't know if like there's easy, quick access to that money. So, bit of a struggle.
Do you think people think a lot about the future, or is it just always now?
We've had this conversation before. People think short term. Unfortunately, you need to start thinking long term, because that's what we're making these decisions for.
I mean, I want to preface this as well, though. I actually don't think it's people's fault. Like,
No, of course
we
not.
do a lot of research in this space, and think about it. Like, we're not only researching now for ourselves, but we're also thinking about ideas that we want to bring to the table for the podcast. But it's interesting. Like, I was watching on Twitter last night, Joe Biden, there was like a clip of him talking about why they're raising their debt limit.
The debt ceiling, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, well, like, if you're someone who doesn't really know much about money and you're not taught money, which the system doesn't teach you, you watch that and you just take it for what he's saying, right? When in reality, when you kind of understand, you go, well, he's saying that they always pay back their debts. Well, if they always pay back their debts, why are they raising the debt limit? Like, why do they need more debt? And I think that's really important for people to understand, is that the media and the government and all these kind of entities don't, like, they're telling a story too, and they're trying to push their own agenda because they have to, right? That's the reality, and I think people need to start, and this is again why we're doing what we're doing, but they need to start taking control of their situation. And learning about this stuff, because it's when you've got Biden coming out and saying that they always pay their debts, that's the American way, but then they're raising their debt ceiling so that they can create more debt.
Well, it's also interesting from a PR perspective. They're talking about tapering bonds, which they probably will do, especially in the near term. They'll start to reduce how much bonds they're buying. But we were having this conversation last week. They still have a bond repurchase program in the background, which banks can utilize and corporates can utilize in order to continue purchasing bonds.
So
And raising, we
talk,
don't want to
talk about that in English, right? So for the listener there, explain that in English.
So the government this is the Fed over in the US, they have been buying $120 billion worth of government bonds every month in order to provide liquidity into the market, which allows them to grow and to further develop the economy and to grow their GDP.
So a bond is...
We're going to go into debt instruments and everything like that.
So what's a bond?
A bond is basically a guaranteed payment from the government in order for them to basically provide liquidity. So to provide money into the system for corporates to use, and then eventually it trickles down to the everyday consumer.
Cool.
So, and because it's issued by the government, it's considered risk-free because they always pay their debts. The only issue with that is that the yield that you receive on those bonds has been decreasing over the last, 30 decades or something like that. And now we're at a point where that yield is at 1.4%. Whereas back in our parents' days, back in like the 80s and that sort of thing, it was yielding upwards of 15 to 17%. And so that's why you saw interest rates really high back in those days. Whereas now we're in such a low interest environment, those yields are going to stay low and they're going to continue to go lower. And especially now when you factor in inflation, everyone's receiving a negative yield. And so with that, that's probably why we're looking at all these alternative assets, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to grow your wealth in this time. And so it's things like crypto, gold, what else? Stocks to a certain point, even though they're really expensive at the moment, and property as well. So these are all hedges against what's happening within the system.
And then, so, what we were talking about was obviously the government saying certain things and kind of around.
So that's a PR perspective, because they've been talking about inflation being transitory, so something that they think is going to go away. But now they're turning that back around, and they're realizing that inflation is going to be permanent. So we're seeing consumer goods especially, they have gone up in price and they will not be going back down. The only thing with that is, though, we've seen stocks and properties go up. Now that we're seeing taper talk and all this sort of thing, they're starting to sell down. And there's all the issues with China as well. So that could put a lot of downward pressure on the market, especially right now with everything being so hot, especially in the property and the stock market. So that is why we're looking at investing into cryptos and other assets.
So what and like what we were talking about before, right, was the government or the Fed and Biden coming out and talking about certain things, and basically saying that they pay back their debts, they do these types of things, but really in the background they're pushing liquidity into the market. They're pulling the wool over everyone's eyes, and that's kind of what we're talking about with the when Biden comes out and says these things. If you're not educated on this and you can't see between that, you take that on its merit, and life goes on, and then that's why we see the wealth gap get bigger. That's why we see all these things, because people that are financially literate, that's what they do, right? They kind of they start to take some of these opportunities, whereas
but then you also factor in, so this is more from a macro perspective. Over the last 50, 60 years, we've had a growing population, and a growing population typically leads to more productivity, which leads to higher GDP as well. Now that the population of the world is starting to decrease, and a lot of our working age is starting to get a lot older as well, a lot of that productivity is leaving the system. And so because they're leaving the system, they're also then going on to the pension and social security and these sorts of things. And they didn't put anything in place in order to facilitate that, in order to fund that. And so this is why we're at a point now where we're basically in a debt spiral, where the only solution for them is to continually printing debt in order to try to grow the economy, and then also to allow these people to retire and live a comfortable life. And so because of that, that is why, they're saying one thing, but they're actually really doing another.
So they need to keep printing debt to fund the social security, to fund the pension, but also to make sure that jobless rates don't keep increasing.
Exactly. Like, there are real concerns in China, because they're actually impacting the productivity that's going on within their economy. by targeting tech companies and all these, and especially the property industry now as well with the Evergrande thing, because they're targeting this, who are the biggest employers within certain countries? In China, it's the tech industry and it's the property industry. By taking away a lot of their funding and a lot of their investments and their profitability, a lot of that money is going to go elsewhere. And this is why emerging economies like India, Brazil, and all these other countries are poised to do a lot better, especially over the next decade. Because otherwise, and we're seeing it now in the US, the reason why the US has grown to be such a large component of the world economy is because they've had a lot of innovation, and their tech companies are the ones who pay the most as well. And so, but now that they've obviously reached pretty much peak performance, we're going to start to see a shift in that money into alternative assets and alternative countries as well.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, the macro environment at the moment is a very interesting one, which is why we're looking at alternative assets.
The world's changing, right?
And
And that's one thing that we can say. The world is definitely changing. So it's, we might be in a revolution. I'm not going to say we are because I don't know, but, it feels like we are. All right.
So the two of us, we're not really looking at the stock market as much, but is there anything that you're currently looking at?
I mean, I can only say what I'm invested in, and I think I'm looking at it. I read a really great book called The Price of Tomorrow with Jeff Booth, and he talks about basically the deflationary economy, right? And how there's certain sectors that are going to really advance or change the way we live currently. So he was kind of he talks about AI, he talks about renewable energy, green energy, and that's basically, and then there's like augmented reality and VR, right? Like they're kind of the three areas that he talks about. So, that's basically where I've put my focus. And, some of the obvious ones is like Tesla, right? So Tesla is one of those ones that everyone's skeptical on, but they're usually skeptical because they don't know the power of renewable energy, right? So one of the best things I read in that book is like, well, when you look at most productive or most production in our country, it relies on energy, right? So, obviously how we get that energy to perform those productive, measures is basically what, there's some of the biggest industries in the world, right? So, he kind of talks about where, what's the cost of living, right? If we live on 100% renewable energy, well, do you have to pay for things like electricity? Do you have to pay for those things? These kind of things that we take for granted every day that we've been paying for forever. That's what changes the world, right? When a lot of these things, the cost of living comes down, and we start to look at that area, right?
Well, it improves your way of life. Like you have to look at a country like Norway. They've got their sovereign wealth fund, and they've invested so much into renewable energies. Now, I'm pretty sure last year they mandated that you can work 4 days a week, and they don't have to pay exorbitant prices in terms of like petrol and gas and all these sorts of things. Huge developments in that sort of space. It's disappointing to see what's happening here in Australia because we're so heavily reliant still on natural gases and oil and iron ore and all these sorts of things.
And it's crazy, right? Because Australia is one of those people who could really take advantage of it. We've got so much land.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they said that they could fund the world's, they could literally fund the whole world's energy from the desert. If they were to just put solar panels in the Australian deserts, they could literally...
We have so much heat as well. So
Yeah,
land,
so much heat.
heat.
Yeah.
When I was in Iceland, their whole renewable energy, they have all these sulfurs and volcanoes.
Yeah, they use the volcanoes.
That they transform. They're a very small country, but they're outsourcing all the energy as well to different countries, and they're pretty, they're a small, I think 300,000 population, but then they're one of the richest in Europe because of what they do. So to answer your question before, you don't actually pay for electricity.
Yeah.
You're putting back into the grid, so you're probably getting paid.
Exactly.
That's the way I think we should all be moving. But yeah, why isn't Australia there or going that way?
Well,
It's taxes.
Yeah, it's taxes and politics, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what we're talking about. That's why Biden comes out and says what he says. You know, all of this is tied in because we're in a world currently where it's like people are clinging on to this old system, right? It's like this old system, this old financial system which rules the world. You know, like Jeff Booth says it, you know, well, is that we're in a debt spiral and we keep printing this money because we don't, like, people believe that we don't have another system to go to, and that other system is here, or we at least have another option. It may not be the system, right? But it's here, and that's what we call cryptocurrency. That's why it's, you know, the market cap is just blowing up with that right now. But this is what causes politicians to come in and never really make any progress, never really make any change, promise the world. And then that's why we consistently see the world losing trust with politicians, right? Because it's not the politicians that is the problem, it's the system they come into.
Exactly.
And that's, you know, Australia holding on to an old system. It's like literally we could just, you know, we could literally fund our whole country's energy from renewable energy with the land that we have, but we refuse to go down.
Well, we
that
could
path.
become a net exporter as opposed to a net importer. We still import a lot of our energy, which is crazy to think about how much. Like, we have surf, we have wind, we have solar. We have so much potential for all of that, but we're not utilizing those resources.
Yeah, and because we're in that debt spiral, you know, John, you were talking about it before, right? Where it's like, well, we don't have to pay for that energy, but because we're in the debt spiral and we're not willing to shift into another monetary system, which means we have to pay. Well, we believe we have to pay those debts back, but people and the government and everybody doesn't realize that it can never be paid back.
No.
Right? Because the system is going in a downward spiral. It's not country versus country, economy versus economy. If you look at the global debt, it's going backwards. You know, the balance sheet, it's going backwards. It continuously goes backwards. And then that's why we don't shift quicker to some of these new systems, because, you know, humans naturally are scared of change. You know, we would rather stay comfortable. We would rather stay in the current system than change. And
we're going to be forced to, though.
Long story short,
Eventually.
that's why I'm invested in Tesla, because, you know, Tesla are the leading, you know, renewable energy company in the whole world.
But you also have to look, they're an interesting case because they're also one of the leaders in AI and data as well. And so just what they can do with that knowledge and those sort of resources as well, which will help them push even further down the renewable energy market too.
Yeah.
So
He also talked about the future of kind of getting around. You know, like if the cost of energy is free and Tesla are producing all of these cars and these cars drive themselves due to the AI that you're talking about, you know, Tesla are kind of leading the self-driving car economy as well. You know, do we need cars, right? Because if we can power those cars for free, right, and you know, and the AI allows us to get around and allows those cars to drive themselves around, we don't need cars anymore, right?
Well, they recently launched a subscription service too, which is pretty interesting.
That's what I mean. So, you know,
you'll just pay a subscription and you'll be able to just be driven around, and then that way you don't have to worry about putting money down on a car. You don't have to worry about servicing it, insurance, all those sort of things.
Yeah. So that's kind of that. You know, I really use Jeff Booth's book and I'm bullish on it. I think it's one of the most important books.
Well, it's the same philosophy that Cathie Woods looks at too. They look at the deflationary environment that technology causes because of Wright's law and the depreciation in costs, which will then lead to further innovation.
100%. You know,
And so she's copped a lot of criticism recently, but those are the sort of areas that we're focused on with our investments, because there's Tesla, we have companies like Square, Shopify, you name it, all these sort of companies, and then now there's all these companies that are expanding into the metaverse and gaming and all these sort of things, which you and I are heavily invested in now.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I think like Roblox is a really interesting one. You know, I think it's like 70% of children play this game in the world. It's ridiculous. Well, I think it might be 70% in the US. I'm not quite sure, but you know, like that is a metaverse company. That is kind of, you know, kids spend most of their time instead of playing out in the lawn with other kids, kicking the footy like probably we all did, and playing sport, they're kind of spending their time in that reality. And that's kind of where they spend time with their friends, and that's kind of what they do.
Social interaction now, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we talk about when we talk about the metaverse. The metaverse is, the virtual reality, the digital reality that we all spend time in, such as Instagram, Facebook, all of these economies or ecosystems that we spend our time in. It's about how do we immerse ourselves in that reality more, right? So that's where virtual reality comes in. That's where augmented reality comes in. That technology makes the experiences within that world, deeper and more indulgent, more stimulating. And that's what, Roblox is one of the leaders in that space. So that's why we look at them but that's a space that is very new. So there's a lot of growth to come into that space. Apple is massive in that space. Facebook is massive in that space. Facebook have released Oculus, which is the virtual reality glasses, right? So they're kind of, I think they've got something like 10,000 employees working purely on the metaverse. Zuckerberg come out and said that they're a metaverse company now. So it's interesting, right? Like if you actually read between the lines with what some of these companies say, you can learn a lot about where they're going. And especially when you look at some of these juggernauts, that's probably where you can start to identify some of these areas that you may want to start to research and actually invest in.
And that leads us off onto the next one, which is the NFTs, because there's Axie Infinity too, which is very similar in a way because it's just another gaming platform, but it's built within a blockchain. And you can actually earn yield, and also you can basically earn an income from it. You see what's happening over in the Philippines, where you have doctors and that sort of thing who are actually earning more than what they would usually in their day-to-day job, earning it from spending time on this Axie Infinity platform.
Yeah.
And yet you have their wives coming out saying, go and spend more time playing this game, because that's allowing them to have a living.
Yeah, 100%. So, crypto's a really interesting space, and so is the blockchain, space as well. So, like I remember I think it was about 4 months ago, I was on calls with our developers, and it's interesting, like we were working through these developers, and I said, hey, I want to kind of talk to some people that you've worked with before. And anyway, I got on a call with a guy from the Philippines, and he was very smart, very switched on, and I think we were on the phone for maybe an hour and a half, and he was kind of mentioning Axie Infinity to me, and I'm going, oh God, like what's, all right, no worries. And
at this point, we'd only been invested in Bitcoin, Ethereum.
Yeah, we were kind of only, and I started to have a look at it, and I think it was sitting at about maybe $70 US a token at the time, and I kind of looked at it, and he explained the model to me, and I started to do my research into it, and it was crazy because the way it works is it's basically an autonomous company, right? So the CEOs, they have developers, but there's no real CEO. There's founders, but there's no real CEO. The way it actually works is they have developers that build an ecosystem, and what governs what is built in the ecosystem is actually the token holders, and that's kind of what we look at as like a social token. And basically the way it works is that it's like Pokemon. That's how I explain it. It's basically like Pokemon, except you can earn money, right? And you can breed, you can battle, you can do all these different things within the ecosystem, and that's basically the game, right? So that's the game that you're indulging in, which exists, again, with that word that we talk about being the metaverse. And then what happens is there's fees, right? So you got to buy your Axie. So your Axie actually costs money, and that's like your Pokemon. So you've got to buy this Pokemon, which is an NFT, and that's kind of where these two worlds collide. And then what ends up actually happening from there is whenever you do any of these things within the game, so whenever you're buying an NFT, whenever you're breeding, whenever you're battling, whenever you're doing these things, that costs you a fee. All of those fees don't go to the company, they go into a treasury. And that treasury is governed by the people who own the Axie token, the AXS token. So, when you own token, you get governance rights, you get voting rights, and you kind of basically guide the ship. And I think in the last 30 days, they've generated $600 million in revenue. Yeah, it really does flip the whole business model on its head.
Yeah, it flips it on its head because we're so used to the advertising and sponsorship model where creators and gamers and that sort of thing can make their money off of those sort of revenue streams, whereas now you basically get paid to play and you just receive out of the treasury as a whole, and I think it takes away that friction that is currently in the model.
Yeah, and I think it's all about inclusivity, right? And you think about the past where gamers, this is their passion, and it's been extremely hard for them to monetize their passion, right? So if you really enjoy playing games, previously society looked down on you, and I think right now what we're seeing is whether you're an artist, whether you're a gamer, whatever it is that you do, where it's been previously really, really hard and really centralized in order to make money, something like Axie, a company that is fully decentralized, there's no CEO, there's nobody changing the goalposts, the community decides what's best for the community, and you can now earn money for something that might be your passion, and you've got greater opportunities there. As we said, people are earning more money on a daily basis from Axie than what they are for being a doctor, right? Which is just wild to think about. But I think it's showing that if something is your passion, there's something now directly, or there's a way for you to directly monetize it, and there are opportunities out there. And as I said before, Axie is now generating 600 million in revenue every 30 days, and that's, I think it doubled the month before. So they're seeing massive growth. It's
all been accelerated because of COVID, right? And we've now realized that more and more people are probably going to shift towards becoming a creator or wanting to do their own thing, as opposed to working for a company where their wages aren't increasing, they're not getting the growth that they thought they would. And so now that we've just seeing all these people become way more autonomous, and with crypto and these new industries that are coming about, there is so much potential for people to actually make a difference in their life. It's so fascinating.
So fascinating.
This is probably, how much time do you reckon we spend just researching all this?
I would spend 20 hours a week minimum.
At least 20, yeah.
And it's interesting, as I said, this all was come to me from someone who lived in the Philippines, who has been experienced, because it's been big over there. And that's what we're going to see. We're going to see people in these countries who honestly have been... The US has had so much power for so long, which, the reality is that there's only, at any one point in time, there's only a certain amount of money that exists in the global economy. Now, the people who can choose to input more of that in are usually the ones in power, so therefore they can make the moves that allow them to be more powerful, and never allow the people that are less powerful, that may be a little bit less well off, less fortunate, and we're talking about countries here, gain that power back. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing opportunity and inclusivity and participation being given to these people, and that's why we're seeing massive growth in these areas, right? That's why we're seeing the slowest to adopt are the countries in the most power on the old system. So I think this is massive opportunity right now for these countries that are that have probably been doing it tough for a long time. They're going to take this opportunity, and they're going to take it quick, because why wouldn't they?
Well, you see it just in terms of what's happened, say, in Central America, where a country like El Salvador, they rely on remittances from the US, basically, and they're now seeing that the value of their dollar depreciating because of all this money that's being spent, or being printed, I should say, over in the US. And so now their ability just to earn a living and this sort of thing is even more compromised. And they have to factor in that there's intermediaries like Western Union, which has now become the greatest short of a lifetime, because their whole business model is screwed. Let's be honest, now that there's these cryptocurrencies. And so the fact that they've now taken it into their own hands and made Bitcoin legal tender, and already that investment that they made into Bitcoin has appreciated, 10% or something like that? It just provides so much access for these countries that have disadvantages compared to the Western world.
I think one thing that we take for granted, especially, it's like privileged reality, right? That's one thing that I've been really aware of lately, and making sure that I keep my focus there. But it's I think, in countries like Australia and the US, and even sometimes it can be within these countries as well, separate areas and where you're brought up and so on. But the thing of privileged reality, right? Where it's we aren't aware of things like you just mentioned before, where money's getting printed from these powerful countries, and it devalues a country's currency like El Salvador, and then directly affects how the people live within that country. And it happens here too, but we're not El Salvador. Australia is not El Salvador, right? So I think privilege reality, and we kind of go, okay, well, why? People sit there on their high horse and they go, well, crypto this, crypto that, it's a bubble, it's this, it's that. It's like, well, why don't you go put yourself in El Salvador's shoes for a day? Why don't you go walk in their path for a day? Why don't you put yourself in that situation for a day and then tell me if it's a bubble?
And if anything, it's going to be interesting because we're going to use El Salvador as a use case, and we'll probably find that they're actually going to become more advanced. Their financial system's going to become more advanced than ours, because a business can get paid via Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, and they'll receive that money instantly, as opposed to waiting a couple of days from the bank in order to facilitate that payment. Now they're going to receive it instantly, and they'll be able to then use that in a way that better suits their business, And it's in an asset right now that has been appreciating at 113% a year.
That's what we're saying. If you're if you're living in the Philippines, right? Why wouldn't you play Axie for a day? Why, if you're El Salvador, why wouldn't you take this opportunity to make Bitcoin legal tender? Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you? And I think that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing we're seeing equal opportunity. We're seeing equality happen in front of our eyes, and it's the people who don't want equality, and that sounds harsh, but it's the truth, who literally choose not to believe in this, who literally choose not to do the research into this, because they've made their money on the high horse for so long.
They rely on the legacy system, don't they? And then you've got countries like China who rely on that control. Like, they're wanting to obviously print or to produce their own digital currency, but what is that going to do to their society? It's going to allow them to have more control and oversight on the transactions that their residents are spending their money on. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this leads to massive protests within China.
I don't know.
There's apps like Weibo and all this sort of thing. Like, they're gonna. There'll be all this chatter amongst the community.
I don't know enough about China to probably make comment here, but from what I've seen is like that's been the case for a long time. Like, I don't think this is going to be anything new to them.
Yeah, but they're going to be out in the world seeing what's happening with the rest of the world, being able to use these decentralized assets and to grow their wealth and this sort of thing, and they might be left behind, especially if the government doesn't help them out with this Evergrande thing. Because a lot of residents have paid their pre-installments for a house, which they may not get back, and they're not going to get the property that they were promised, and that money might just go away, and then they're left at square one again, and so there's all these different issues that are going on over there and now that the fact that they've blocked mining and all this sort of thing, if anything, it's actually made Bitcoin better. It's made it even more decentralized. There's less miners in China, and it's been spread out amongst the globe. So it's actually improved the Bitcoin network, and off to the races.
But we're obviously very passionate about crypto, and I think it is difficult when you don't research it as much as what we have to actually understand it. It's one of those things. I do ask you all to actually do your research into it, because that way you can make a decision for yourself. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And
I don't know how you can be sitting there seeing this asset that's been growing at 113% and not just putting in a little bit, Just put in a little bit, and you never know what's going to happen. That you might put in, say, 1 or 2% of your net worth. That might grow to 10%, and you'll be kicking yourself wishing you put more.
I mean, part of me goes, I do understand why. Like, I do get it, and that's because they don't. It's hard if you're not researching. Like, you're relying on what you see, and it's not like the media that people see is not necessarily going to be sitting there and rooting this thing on. Right? It's just, it's the reality. And I think if, especially when you don't understand a lot of these terms that we're talking about, like, it's not one of those things that you just don't see it.
The news is made from legacy players anyway. Like, they've made their money in the old system, and they're now promoting all this, or they call it FUD, in order to expel this idea. And I just think it's such a bad way to look at it, though. And they're sapping innovation, if that makes sense, by slowing it down, by classifying these things as securities and whatnot. It just slows down the innovation that could potentially help bring us out of this this massive hurdle that we're in.
Mm. And the last one is NFTs. This is new to us. So this is obviously a really, really new space. Have you invested in any NFTs?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Have you had a look at it at all?
I only got introduced probably last week. It was a little bit hard to get my head around, because, being a creative myself, I don't know, you feel like if you did a photo, let's just say, you print it out, that's it, that's the copy. So to have something digitally, why would you think that it can't just be duplicated? Like, how does that, just getting my head around it was hard at the start, and I think a lot of people are going to feel the same way. But then more research into it, you're like, it's another big game that's going to explode, I feel.
We won't touch too much on what an NFT is and all of that, because we'll discuss it heavily next week.
Yeah, next week, guys, by the way, if you're listening, we have the Business of Blockchain mini-series, which is going to be really, really cool. So we're going to be covering social tokens and NFTs, which is basically, we're going to look at the business application, not necessarily as an investment, but how does this change the way we do business? So be there. Little plug.
But also just to wrap your heads around what it actually is and why you have those sort of issues that people are recognizing, because we both know that there's not going to be that forgery that's involved, because it's all registered on the blockchain within the ledger. So, but we'll touch on all that on next week.
Yeah, but so in terms of NFTs, right, I think there's massive opportunities out there right now. But for me, I kind of allocated myself a budget that I wanted to spend, and I exhausted that budget.
It becomes highly addictive.
It does. But one thing I will say is that there are some massive opportunities out there, but it's also very easy to lose money as well. So it's one of those ones that you got to be willing to lose. And I'm in the green. I was able to flip an NFT and actually make a bit of money. And then I've also spent some money on some that I just don't think are going to go anywhere. Unfortunately. So I think NFTs is one of those things that it's very risky at the moment. I couldn't sit here and say that I have a framework that I could say, this is how I look at it and this is how I'm going to invest. I think some of the main things you look at is the quality of the artwork, the quality of the community, the utility that you get on the back end, the clout of the person who's built the project is also something that's really important. But I've invested in
it's very hard to value at the moment, isn't it? We don't truly know how to value community just yet, and that's essentially what this is. It's valuing that engagement that people have within their community, and so it's very hard to obviously distinguish what community is going to add value and which ones aren't. And so it really does. It's got to come down to what artwork resonates best with you. And then also you got to be within the Discord. You've got to be on the Twitter and sort of seeing what people amongst this community are doing and whether they're vocal or whatnot. It's just there's so many being minted at the moment. Probably 99% of what's currently out there won't be as valuable as what they are today, but it's going to be so rapidly evolving. It's just going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is. And I think what you said before is it really is, for me, I see this evolving as the way that we value brand, right? Previously brand was intangible. You couldn't put a value on it. I feel like now what we can do is we can actually start to put value on things such as brand, and we can start to put value on things such as social capital, right? So followings. And I think what we're probably going to see is the projects that do really well are going to come from people that are really good at building brands, right? So you look at the people who have previously built brands, and if they're coming out with a project, we're probably going to see those people succeed. And we're also going to see people that we don't know who are great brand builders that are going to succeed as well. So that's probably one of my biggest learnings around that space. And I'm not going to invest anymore, to be fair. I've got the NFTs, and if they sell, then I might reinvest. But at the moment, I'm actually quite standoffish and kind of taking a back seat. I've got the money in. I've learnt what I need to learn to kind of indulge a little bit. I still know bugger all about it.
We need to let it mature quite a lot. It's like investing in 1997 when the internet was new and everything was exciting and fun. There's going to be a moment like 2000 when everything comes crashing back down, but amongst the rubble, there's going to be these winners. You're going to find your Amazons and your Googles and whatnot. And so, yeah, just have to sort of just be careful when you are investing in this space. Don't put your life saving into it all, but there is potential there, and it is quite exciting. Like this, some of the things that we're going to be able to do with these NFTs in the future is just going to be insane, and it's going to change society. Like, I'm that bullish on it.
Me too. To wrap this up, everybody, including DJ Johnny, on the decks.
Resident DJ.
Drink cards. Who's got the drink cards? We're going to... I want everyone... So, the investment that you currently own that you're the most bullish on, and why?
Bitcoin. Easy.
Why?
Because it is completely decentralized and it is growing at 113% a year over the last 10 years. And we haven't even started to see any sort of institutional money come into this space. And it is literally the only digital currency that is completely decentralized. And it's not going to go away at all. And so I think that from here it is going to absolutely explode over the next 10 years, and I will not be selling a single coin.
Johnny boy?
As much as I'd like to say something in crypto, I'm pretty new to that world. So I would have to say at this point, real estate and the market at this point over the last even year has been 15% and up. So yeah, I think that's...
I thought you were going to say your own business, actually.
Yeah, you could invest in yourself. It's always a good thing. But yeah, I would have to say real estate at this point. Pretty old school, but we'll get there.
Safety Steve up there. No, for me, it's the investment that I'm most bullish on is Axie. I just think that a company that's been around for 3 years, who's able to generate 600 million in revenue every 30 days, the rate of growth that they're going at, the decentralized nature of how the community works, I'm pretty sure they've only captured 2 or 3% of potential that is out there, which, you know, if you tie those numbers of revenue into the percent of market share captured, it's huge. I think the metaverse is the future. The signs are already there. The writing's on the wall. They're the leaders in that space. And I just think that the community that they're building, the opportunities they're providing for people that don't usually have those opportunities, I just think it's going to change the world. And not only with their company, they're going to change the world, but they're going to inspire others to do the same. I'm just extremely bullish on them.
Yeah, we're seeing a few others that are on the verge of sort of approaching those sort of numbers too. It's a very exciting space.
All right, guys. Investors Podcast wrapped up. Hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, just remember that we really do appreciate all the support that we're getting at the moment. It's quite crazy. We've got some seriously exciting projects that we're working on at the moment in the background. So we're not going to tell you too much about those now, but what we can say is that we aren't able to do those without your support. So, you know, a massive thank you. Remember to subscribe. And again, thank you for all the shares, all the comments, everything that you do for us on a socials front. That's really what drives our ability to continue to do this. So really grateful. We really hope you enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next week.